Congratulations on the movie.
Thank you.
Thanks.
David, I wanted to come your way first because I was reading that Disney first approached you about this film when you were winding down on Pete's Dragon. So it was making me wonder, what would you say is the biggest difference between how you pictured the film turning out when you first committed to making it and then what we see in the final product now?
That's an excellent question. I think it is quite similar to what we had in mind in that it feels real. It's got the rush and the scope and the sense of adventure that no pun intended hooked me from the very beginning. And it has the depth of character that I was yearning for when I thought of like, how would I tell this story? But there are so many things that I could never have anticipated. There were so many, twists and turns the project took over the years that, I just could not have, dreamed up back then, whatever day in March of 2016 that I signed on to this. And the joy of working on something for this long, and this is certainly the longest I've ever worked on one thing, is seeing those watermarks along the way of seeing how it developed, seeing how it changed, seeing how I changed as I made this film.
Just to get an example there, can you share something that changed over the course of that process that now we can see influencing the finished film?
Certainly. When I set out to make the movie initially, I was like, let's do a 90-minute Peter Pan adventure movie. It hits all the beats, we're in and out, and it's just like Fast and Furious, not like literally Fast and Furious the movies, but like that we just keep moving. And then at a certain point, we realized, let's slow it down a little bit. Let's start to ask questions about these characters because I was starting to feel curious about them. And that led to a lot of the wonderful new material we've got about Hook and Peter that when I first went into the studio and pitched my take, that certainly wasn't on the table, but it became the centrifuge of the entire movie in so many ways. And that was a process to get to that point.
Oh, I can't imagine this movie without that. And that gives me a perfect segue to go to you now, Jude. So we do get the necessary information to support the story that this movie is telling, but you guys open up a pretty significant door to a lot of backstory for Hook that we've never explored before. So did you do any backstory work on your own or come up with any little details that maybe we don't see or hear about directly in the film, but we can feel informing your performance that you hope viewers pick up on?
Well, I was very lucky in that an awful lot of it is ultimately explained in the brig scene with Wendy, and so that I don't remember. I mean, we talked a lot about all of the backstory in detail in pre-production, and there were just tiny little details or confirmations between the two of us that okay, this is how it happened. But beat by beat, it's pretty much as described by Hook, and I suppose what was most interesting was then taking, okay, if that's what happened, then how has that affected who he is and what he looks like, and of course suddenly you take an idea or you take a story and it suddenly turns into something three-dimensional and fleshed out, and then you start thinking about, well, actually playing that is very different to imagining it. Playing someone who is sort of locked into this childhood rivalry in the body of a sort of 50-year-old man who has seen and lived and done terrible things is a really interesting area to start playing, I was just conscious that I wanted to bring in all the elements. I wanted him to be sad. I wanted him to be scarred and gnarly and disgusting and scary and funny too, like a sort of an overheated, angry dad or uncle who from a kid's perspective is just really pathetic and loud, And
there were so many little details that supported that, such as, I don't know if you remember, but the set was full of your cabin was full of all these drawings that Hook had made of ways to maybe capture Peter Pan.
They made some of them too. They were like little catapults.
Yeah.
And
crossbows
and balloons with nets in. And I mean, just this guy of like, I've got to get this boy. I've got to get him. Yeah. There was also, I don't know if you see the collection of hands.
The collection of hands in jars.
In jars. Yeah. Where he's obviously try to sew something back on, you know.
I love looking for all those little details. Now I have a reason to go back and watch it again.
Sure, they're all there.
Do you view your Captain Hook as a true villain, like a person who was destined to find himself on a darker path eventually? Or is he a man who was basically forced to become one, just completely reshaped by the influences around him?
I think the latter.
Mm-hmm.
I think the latter. And I think what's extraordinary about this version is that by the end, he's been on a journey where he's allowed to retain the best parts of that, which is, you know, the sort of yin to Peter's yang without the hatred. I mean, it's very interesting that he gets to say hope at the end, that his hope is, I can keep playing, but maybe, well, as Peter says, without such a bad game. Like Peter says, I don't like this game. You know, it's suddenly perhaps not the jeopardy, but the threat goes.
You feel it. All right, I want to squeeze in one unrelated question before they make me leave you guys about Skeleton Crew. And I'll throw this to you, Jude, because you get to work with an exceptional lineup of directors there, David included. So is there anything you could tease about maybe the consistent style and tone of the show, but then also how those very specific voices that we've come to love and know so well are going to be able to shine through that as well?
I think like Disney, or like an extraordinary legacy piece of work like Peter Pan and Wendy by J.M. Barrie, or like Star Wars, you know, great storytellers, writers, directors, actors all have their version, their interpretation of that, what it means to them. And it's incredibly malleable, you know, but you got to stick to certain rules, but it's very, very malleable. And what was wonderful was seeing how all of these formidable directors brought their signature, their tone to it, and yet it was always in that world, and that world is, you know, can withstand a huge amount.
They've done it before. I believe they're going to do it again with Skeleton Crew. I look forward to that. Congratulations on this. I cannot wait. My new thing now that I have a niece and nephew is that when I see movies like this that I know I can share with them and they'll appreciate it, it fills my heart. And this is
That's
now
perfect.
I hope they enjoy it.
Makes me so happy.